Hey y'all, welcome back again to another episode of Healthy Design. I thought today we'd continue our discussion on genetics and SNPs, kind of move away from MTHFR, and we'll talk about COMT and DAO today, and we'll kind of keep moving down some of these more common genetic SNPs and how they can impact things for us, impact our health. But keep in mind, we all tend to have thousands of different SNPs, and some of them we don't know how they all interact with each other and kind of how all that plays out. These are just some of the more common ones and where we know what they do and things as well. So it's not going to be an exhaustive list by any means, but it'll be a helpful list, and one, if you have some of these issues, it could make a big difference in how you feel. So I think it will be helpful for a good number of people. So with COMT, this is another one that's involved in methylation. It stands for catecholomethyltransferase. So that's the enzyme that helps to break down the catecholamines. Catecholamines include dopamine, epinephrine, norepinephrine. COMT also helps to metabolize estrogen too, so that can play a role with different things. And again, when we have these SNPs, when they occur, it changes the efficiency of how those enzymes work. So it could make it to where they work too well or where they don't work quite as well. So they're not working, they're either slow or they're fast. And so with COMT, we can have slow and we can have fast. And there are strengths and weaknesses or pros and cons for each of them. So for the slow COMT, the strength part of it would be like a natural enthusiasm, be altruistic, generous, productive. You can focus that length on things. But the weakness, you'll have trouble winding down. That can lead to sleep issues, be workaholic, and you can have difficulty metabolizing estrogen. And so on the fast side, the strength, you kind of naturally calm, high stress tolerance. But on the weakness side, you're going to have trouble revving up. Can lead to some memory issues, and these people tend to go towards depression as well. And so what the COMT does, it's going to help us to metabolize catechols that are found in like tea, coffee, quercetin, and chocolate. Again, estrogen, dopamine, epinephrine, norepinephrine is going to help metabolize those too. And so that way it can help kind of process them, get things out of our body, and that's what we need it to do. So kind of a good general way to look at it. A slow COMT means you're not going to clear things very well, and so you're going to have trouble settling down. A fast COMT, you're going to clear things a little too well, and you're going to have a hard time revving up to do things. And methylation is involved with this. Again, we have COMT, catecholomethyltransferase, we have methyl there. So there is going to be some interaction with the methylation process with that cycle as well. And SAMe, in this case, is what's going to be the methyl donor for COMT. And so if our methylation isn't working very well, then our SAMe won't work so well either, or it's going to be too low. And if that supply is low, then that can be problematic. So let's say you have a slow COMT, and then you also have low SAMe. That's going to make that slow COMT even more pronounced because you don't even have enough methyl donors in the first place. If the COMT is fast, maybe not having that big supply of SAMe, so that big methyl donor, that may actually help to kind of balance things. But if that continues on, it's probably going to lead to some issues, and then it might start making that fast COMT start to be more like a slow COMT, and that's not what we want. So again, with this, if we got different neurotransmitters like dopamine, epinephrine, norepinephrine, then that means it's going to be involved in a lot of things with mood and stress, how we respond to it. So a lot of times people will refer to dopamine as the pleasure neurotransmitter, and that's accurate, but I think sometimes when people say it that way, it gives the wrong impression. It's that like dopamine makes them feel pleasure. And it's not exactly that. What it tries to do is kind of reinforce the pleasure you got from doing that activity, so you'll do that activity that brought pleasure again. So hopefully that makes sense, and it's a little bit of a nuanced way of looking at it. Now, epinephrine, norepinephrine, that's involved in our stress cycle. That's a good thing. We want stress. Not all the time, but I think there's, again, just all the time people talk about stress like it's a bad thing and we need to minimize it and get rid of it completely. And that's not the case. That's how our body works. That's how our body learns. That's how our body adapts to different things. Exercise is a stress. And by having that stress there, our body builds up and does different things. And if we do, like, again, we talked about this before, if you take like a lot of antioxidants around exercise, you actually impact that in a negative way. So you don't get the same adaptations that you would otherwise. So we want some stress in our life. We just want to be able to ramp up to deal with that stress and then come back down. So it's not that we want to eliminate all stress. We definitely don't want chronic low-grade inflammation, low-grade stress all the time. We want to be able to complete the cycle and get back. So we want that sympathetic fight, flight, or freeze when we need it to respond to something. But once that response is no longer needed, we want to be able to shift into that parasympathetic state, rest and digest. And so again, it's kind of completing the cycle. We talked about this before. Watching like Animal Planet, you can see how animals complete the cycle, and that's why, according to Robert Sapolsky, zebras don't get ulcers. And so, we don't want to get ulcers too, so we probably need to complete that stress cycle. So hopefully that's helpful, because again, stress is an important thing. We need some of it. We just don't need it all the time, and we need to respond to it well. So it's not about eliminating it. It's about managing it well and responding in the right way. So what are some things that can make the COMT gene dirty? Well, if we don't have enough SAMe, that's going to mess things up. Low homocysteine and increased estrogen could all impact the slow COMT and make it dirty. The fast COMT, if we have too much SAMe going, that can make it run fast. We have all the methyl donor going on. So some key nutrients that we need, well, for methylation, we need riboflavin, we need folate, we need B12, we need protein, and we need magnesium. And so that's just in general for the methylation pathway. For COMT, magnesium is really important too. And again, magnesium is important for over 200 different chemical reactions that are going on in our body. Some of the same things we talked about last week regarding that soak and scrub or methylation diet and lifestyle. We want to do those same things. They're going to be important for COMT. They're going to be important for DAO, PEMT, NOS3. It's going to be important for all the genes and all the SNPs. It's important for overall health. Again, the fundamentals of health are fundamental, so it applies in all places. So again, start with that kind of diet lifestyle factor, then move into some of these key nutrients if you're still having issues. By doing those diet and lifestyle factors, even though the gene, that SNP, may be dirty, it can act clean, and maybe we don't need these other nutrients because we're getting it through diet. So hopefully that makes sense. And I can't stress enough how important it is to have those fundamentals down. It'll just make a huge difference on things. And then if you have those down, even if you need some of those key nutrients later, probably the amount you're going to need is going to be a lot lower, and the length of time you're going to need is probably going to be a lot less too. And so I think that's the ideal way to go about it. All right, so DAO is diamine oxidase. It helps to break down histamine. Again, histamine's part of an immune reaction. It can lead to kind of itchy, that redness, different things along those lines. So if our DAO enzyme is overwhelmed, then other genes are going to take over, but they're going to rely on methyl groups and methylation, so then that's going to put more stress there. So if we already have some issues with either COMT or MTHFR, that's not going to be a good combination. Again, DAO helps to process histamine. Too much histamine leads to your body reacting to a lot of different foods, or it can react to a lot of different exposures, chemical exposures, environmental exposures. So basically, in a sense, if it's kind of overactive, then your immune system's overactive, and it's reacting a little too often to things and more than what we want. But some strengths of this, well, you're aware of different allergens or different problems a lot quicker. You can also be aware of different problematic foods a lot quicker. So basically, it just kind of helps to alert you to an issue before it becomes a big issue. And so that's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. You might not feel so well when it's telling you to avoid those things, but at least that lets you know not to keep doing those things. So you're trying to put that kind of positive spin on it. So again, histamine is a part of our immune system, and it will help to fight different pathogens in our gut. So it also aids gut motility, and it helps the stomach to secrete acid so it can digest different proteins. Well, digest all proteins and digest food just in general. But we need a lot of acid to be able to digest and assimilate that protein well. So that's a big thing that's important, and that's where some of the PPIs can be problematic because they decrease. So proton pump inhibitors, they can decrease the acid in our stomach, which can actually affect digestion in a negative way. And so we want to be careful with that. It's not saying that we never want to take a PPI, but it also means that we need to be aware that it's not just all positives with it. There could be some possible negatives as well. Another thing too, speaking of protein, histidine is one of the essential amino acids, and it's turned into histamine by some of the by some of the bacteria in our gut. Different foods can be high in histamine. Leftovers can be high in histamine. Probiotics or fermented foods can be high. That's why sometimes, even though people have different gut issues, a lot of times you'd want them to take probiotics or to eat, different fermented foods, kimchi, sauerkraut, things like that, but they end up reacting to it when they do. And so, there are certain probiotic strains that can actually decrease histamine. Maybe if this is an issue, avoiding leftovers can be a problem because the leftover foods, that histamine content tends to go up as well. However, just trying to decrease histamine in foods and eating low histamine foods, different things like that, doesn't normally fix the issue. It can be a good adjunct to things, but we want to get things working well to get the most bang for our buck. So let's see. If any part of digestion is overwhelmed, so either the enzymes aren't working well, we don't have the acid that we need, microbiome, so we got some kind of bacterial overgrowth or just imbalance there, then it's most likely going to have a negative impact on DAO, and then that means we're going to have other issues. Leaky gut can become an issue with this. So again, if you want to find this on PubMed, search for intestinal permeability, and you can find dozens and dozens and dozens of papers on it. And so with leaky gut, we tend to have an increase in inflammation and an increase in histamine. So that's not good. And if the cells in our gut wall are damaged, then we're going to have openings in those tight junctions. That's going to allow partially undigested food to get out into our bloodstream, and that's going to be a problem. And so again, if we have these things going on, we got DAOs not working well, then there's going to be less DAO enzyme to break down that undigested food, that histamine that's involved with it. And then also, as we have some of that inflammation and damage done, then the cells there in the gut lining, they're not producing the same amount of DAO. So they're going to produce less DAO, which is going to further compound the problem. The other thing with the PPIs, they do block the histamine receptors as well. So not only do they decrease acid and different things which can affect digestion, they also block the histamine receptors. So that can be a problem. Some of the key nutrients that we need for DAO to function well: calcium, copper. We want to make sure we balance kind of high acid or acid generating foods too. That way we can kind of decrease the stress on that DAO and kind of the amount that we need. And one thing to keep in mind too, kind of goes back to the COMT. If we have increased levels of estrogen, so if they're going up, then we tend to have increased histamine levels too. And this is something that women will notice a lot of times during their cycle, that when their estrogen levels go up, they have more gut issues, they're more sensitive to foods, they get more redness, itchy, different things like that. So you can start to see how all of this plays together. So we need DAO to help break down things, but we need COMT to break down estrogen, so it's not increasing histamine for the DAO to break down and put more stress on it. But for COMT to work well, we also need that methylation cycle to work well so that we have the right amount of methyl donors. We don't have too much, we don't have too little. So everything interacts with each other. That's why I don't like to focus just on one thing, or one system in the body, because that one thing, that one system, it doesn't function independently of the rest. Uh, Isolating things, being more reductionist, and drilling in on that one thing, that one system, that's a great way to learn all that you can about that one thing, that one system. But then we need to come back out and see how that interacts with the whole body. That way we can start to tie things together, get better outcomes for people on different things. And again, I wanted to share some of this with you guys. I wanted to share some of the key nutrients, but that's not saying, hey, just go get the supplement to get those key nutrients. So okay, you think you might have a problem with COMT, just start taking magnesium. Granted, there's very little downside to taking magnesium, but just because you're taking magnesium, it might help you to feel better, but that alone is not addressing the issue. Again, the fundamentals of health come into play here. We've got to make sure we're getting sleep. We've got to make sure we're eating a healthy diet. For us, that can be a little bit different for everybody, but let's make sure we're getting different nutrients from protein sources. If you can do organ meats, that's going to be a great way to do it. Spices have a lot of nutrients as well. Let's make sure we're getting vegetables and some fruit and different things to get micronutrients that way. But there's also micronutrients again in meat. So we want to make sure we're having that whole process going. And we need protein for all the different processes in our body, all the different enzymes, for our gut health to, our gut lining to be healthy. Those cells require protein, so we want to make sure we're getting that in. But then, if we're having that diet that consists of those things, we could be getting enough magnesium coming in. We could be getting enough B12 coming in, and methyl or folate in different forms. Might not just be methylfolate, but we could have all that coming in, so it helps to support MTHFR, it helps to support COMT, and then we're not stressing DAO or anything like that. And then again, sleep, our body recovers a whole lot during sleep. That's why it's so important. That can help to have those reserves for our body to handle other things. Again, we saw how COMT is involved in the stress response. Again, stress is a good thing. It's not all bad. We don't want a life with no stress. That's not going to be good for us. We also don't want a life that's just only stress. That's not going to be good for us. We want it to kind of fluctuate up and down, or have a cycle going to where, okay, I've got something coming up. Let's take me, for example. All right, I'm about to climb on the wall or work out. Well, then I need a little bit of a stress response. That epinephrine, norepinephrine, that's going to release different things so that my heart rate goes up. I can perform better. My muscles are going to be ready to take in different nutrients so they can perform better. And so I'll climb better. I'll lift more weight. I'll have a better workout. But then once that workout's done, I don't want to stay up there. I want to be able to come back down into that parasympathetic rest and digest state. And then my body will have time to kind of build up and accommodate and adapt to that training that I did. So that's kind of how we want to see all these things. And then activities, another thing that plays a role in stress. Our body's made to move. We don't want to be too sedentary. That's not going to be good for us. So again, trying to keep those fundamentals in mind. One thing I didn't talk about much last week. I'll go on my little rant right now. I'm not a big fan of a lot of the detox things that you see. That I do think detox is important. We need to be able to detoxify our body. Luckily, our body's got a lot of different ways of doing that. What I'm not a fan of are the really complicated, expensive detox programs and the fear mongering that they kind of do with it too. Like, oh, your body's toxic, blah, blah, blah. We're exposed to different chemicals all the time. So even if you did one of those, highly complex, highly expensive detox programs and stayed in a hermetically sealed home with air purifiers and everything else, okay, you might actually detox for a change completely and not have anything to worry about, as far as exposures, because that home is hermetically sealed, you got the air purifier. But as soon as you open the door or break that seal, you're going to be exposed to different chemicals. So again, it's not about just never being exposed to anything, we can't do that. Now, that doesn't mean we want to just go out and expose ourselves to everything we possibly can. So yeah, try to limit those things as best you can. I do think air purifiers are a good idea. But we can't eliminate all exposures. There's just no way we can do it, not in society, not in the world we live in. But the other problem I have with those things, there are a couple different phases for detoxification in our body. And just by saying take all, this supplement and this supplement and this supplement and this supplement, this supplement, that can work. But what you see a lot of times with it are some of the things you see that we talked about with genetic testing. Oh, you've got these SNPs, or this test was done and now these are the supplements you take. Well, supplement A that you need for condition X is actually contraindicated for symptom Y, and condition B, and blah blah blah. And so you kind of miss out on that. So there are different supplements that can help, like phase 1 of detoxification, but they actually impair phase 2 of detoxification, and vice versa. Some might support and kind of help that phase 2 side, but they hinder phase 1 side. Well, we need both phases kind of be going and going well. And so I just wouldn't get too caught up into trying to get those different programs, because again, we're going to be exposed to stuff. So let's try to make sure our body is as healthy as it can, because the wisdom that it has in dealing with all these things will probably work better the more we can get out of the way. And so if we're following those fundamentals of health and maybe adding in just some key nutrients that we seem to need, then we're taking load off of our body. Now it's got the resources and the reserves to deal with anything that comes up. So that's my little spiel on detox. I don't like those programs. I think I made that quite clear. I'm not saying detoxification is not important. It's very clear, but let's make sure we're using the bathroom, pee and poop. That's some big things right there. Let's focus on breathing. That's another way that can help out on the stress side of things too, but we're actually getting rid of some of those toxins by just breathing. And then let's make sure we're sweating sometimes. So, the exercise side can help out on that. Again, has a stress component to it. It helps to burn off some of that extra energy, but then we're also sweating and getting rid of some of those toxins and different things too. So I think if for the vast majority of us, if we're doing those things and we got those things well, gut health going well so that we are passing things, we're probably not going to need to be doing all these expensive, complicated detox procedures. So it's just my 2 cents. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this. We'll continue on with some of the other genes as we go. Then we'll kind of keep trying to tie it all back into how they all work together as well, because I don't want it to become an issue of just focusing on one thing. And again, I don't want this to be something that's fearful. We've got some control over things. We can control our diet and our lifestyle. So we can control some of that. And that way we can have the best health we can have. Maybe it's not 100%, but at least it'll be better than what it is. But appreciate you guys watching. Thanks so much. Please like, subscribe, do all that fun stuff, and I will see you next time.